Hey guys, what is up? So today I'm going to be talking about Telltale games and the Walking Dead series for Telltale. Now, you could argue that The Walking Dead was essentially the game that got Telltale on the map. Out of all the games they've ever made, I believe, in my opinion, that The Walking Dead is the game that got Telltale the recognition and really the mainstream type of recognition that they got and, to where they get all the deals they have now. But what I really want to talk about is my hopes for season 3 and what I hope they do differently than they did for season 2. Because the one thing about The Walking Dead that they try to sell you on is that it's really about story and it's about your choices, and your choices affect the story. And in season 1, while your choices did affect the story to a small extent, to a larger spectrum when you look at the entire story, your choices really don't matter. I mean, sure, you do have the choice of at times saving one person over another, but eventually that person ends up dying ultimately, or, they end up just leaving you. So really, when you try to save characters, it really doesn't matter. For example, you can choose to save Ben or Carly, Doug or Carly, but at the end, they all die, Like, it doesn't feel like at the end of the game that you're like, wow, my choices actually affected how the game came out. Like, you just kind of feel like, a few of my choices mattered, but for the most part, the game kind of puts you on rails to what it wanted you to do in a way. Like, it gave you some side choices, but for the main part, the story kind of guided you on its own. Like, the game kind of essentially guided you on the way it wanted you to go. Like, when you chose not to steal from the bandits in season 1 and episode 2, I believe, with the St. John's, it feels like it really didn't matter what you did because the stranger, kind of puts it like, yeah, well, you didn't do it, but, your team or your group did anyway, so, you got to deal with it anyway. So, it really doesn't feel like a lot of your choices matter. Like, most of your choices are just kind of for nothing. They're just choices you make, and ultimately they're just pointless. And what I want and hope that they do for season 3 is that they make your choices count and that what you do actually affects the story, because I feel like from season 1 to season 2, it feels like they only weaken how much the effectiveness of your choices put into the game, because, they tried to sell you on when season 2 came out, that when season 2 came out, that your choices from season 1 would really affect your story in season 2. It really didn't affect nothing. I mean, you got mentioned, like when you met Kenny, he kind of mentioned about whether Lee shot Duck or if he made Kenny shoot Duck himself. But it really wasn't anything drastic. Like, you're like, oh yeah, like, that's actually my choice, that carried on. Like, you didn't feel that. You just kind of felt like there were mentions of what you did from season 1 that were carried over to season 2 as like little references, but not like actual story, like events or characters or places were affected by what you did in season 1. It was kind of like reference points. And even in 400 Days, like, the characters that you bring to Carver's camp, it really doesn't feel like it matters because they only have a little bit of side cameos and then they're really gone. Like, you see each of them for maybe a few seconds or a minute, with the exception of Bonnie, but, it feels like it was pointless, trying to get everyone to go to camp, seemed like it was just pointless because at the end, no one really went anywhere. Like, they just kind of disappeared after the whole Carver's camp got attacked. So, the one thing I hope they do in season 3 is that they make it to where your choices actually affect the story. And not just the story, but the outcome. Because season 3 is going to be it for Telltale's The Walking Dead. There will not be any more seasons for The Walking Dead. So this has to be the best season, arguably, of the Walking Dead franchise from Telltale. And the only way that I believe they can do that is by making sure that your choices and your the way you play the game affects how the game plays out. And I'm not talking that your choices affect the game, but then everyone ends up having the same ending. I want them to make it to where you have a variety of endings, where if you do this, this happens, and then that happens, and this leads you to that ending, versus you do this and that, and you end up with this ending, and maybe you end up with someone else, and you go somewhere else to end the season, versus you're on your own, maybe something happened to the baby, and you're on your own, or you meet an old character, something. They have to make it feel like your choices actually make the game, and your choices actually kind of mold the game into what it is. Not, you have choices, but they really don't mean anything, because Telltale tries to sell you on your choices make the game, but they really don't when you think about it, because they make the game to an extent, but they're really side choices. Most of your decisions are really just side choices when you think about it. You have the option of saving Ben from the bell tower in episode 4, but then he only dies in episode 5, meaningless. You save Carly in the drugstore, only for her to get shot in the head by Carly, or Lily. Pointless, It really doesn't feel like any of your choices mean anything, In season 1, out of both the seasons, arguably, season 1's the one I felt really made you feel that your choices counted, because in season 2, it felt like, you just made choices and it just kind of prolonged the inevitable. You save Nick now, or he ends up dying later on. It doesn't feel like anything you do in the game really affects the game to a point, because like I said, the game has this main story for you. No matter what your choices are, the game has its own direction that it's taking you, regardless of what you do and what you say to people. And I think that that's really a kind of a flaw of the series. It really kind of makes you not want to really make any big choices in the game, because that in the end, your choices are pointless. So that's one thing I want in season 3, is that your choices matter. The second thing I want is for better character development. Because in season 2, I have to, as much as I love some of the characters, they had such a lackluster depth of character development and character relations. Like, the entire group of Luke's group, it really, no one really cared about them in the most part, because the only person they really kind of built to make you care about was Luke. Because, Luke was supposed to be the new big brother, figure. He was supposed to kind of semi-replace Lee as your caregiver or your caretaker or your overseer. But besides Luke, no one else is really given any development, You had a little bit of side story that, Rebecca was pregnant, she was Carver's, baby mama. You got, what was his name? Carlos. You knew that he was a doctor and he sheltered his daughter. You knew about Sarah, who was a sheltered child who didn't know anything about the real world. You really didn't know much about Alvin. You knew that Nick was kind of this alcoholic, kind of screw up all the time. But for the most part, we really didn't get to know these characters, because they died off so quick and so abruptly. You really didn't care. Like when Pete died, no one really cared. While he did, while we got to know him a little bit better in a short period of time, it wasn't enough for us to care. And that's one thing I will say that they did better in season 1. And I want them to take what they did in season 1 as far as the characters and take that to season 3, because in my opinion, that's what made the first season so good, is because we actually started to care for these characters. We started to care about Kenny's family. We cared about when Kenny's family died. We felt sorry for Katja when she died. We felt sorry for Duck when he died. We felt sorry for Kenny having to go through that. We felt sorry that Clementine's parents were dead. We felt this completely terrible and heartbroken when Lee was bitten. There was a mixed reaction when, Ben died. People were sad and had a reaction when Carly died, and even when Doug died. What happened to these characters we came to actually care about. And in season 2, that really didn't happen because we didn't get to have that type of in-depth relationship with those characters. It was just kind of like they got this group of characters together and just slapped them together and just kind of gave you a little broad spectrum of what they all were. Rebecca was this kind of, annoying, rude, obnoxious woman who you met at the beginning, who kind of became more of a nice and more wonderful person that you came to like. But, no one really kind of cared as much as they did in season 1 for the characters. When, Katja died and Duck died, people were actually sad. They were depressed that they died because they were characters we had, come to love. They had come with us from episode 1 all the way to then, and it was sad. We had a connection to those characters, whether you hated them or loved them. When Larry died, people were happy that Larry died, or people felt sorry that Larry died. Whatever your feelings were towards these characters, you actually cared about the outcome of these characters and what happened to them. And in season 2, it really was none of that. It was lackluster as far as how they made the characters really meaningful to us. They kind of just slapped these characters together and kind of just gave us these broad kind of little descriptions of them. But that's not enough for anyone to care about them. The only person they really kind of built above anything was Luke, because Luke was supposed to be kind of this, brotherly figure to Clementine. But other than him, no one else was really given any type of character development to where it came to the point where when they died, we cared about it. Not really, For example, when Carlos died, people were like, oh, but no one was like, oh my God, Carlos died. People weren't sad. They were shocked because it just suddenly happened, but they weren't, sad. When Nick died, people were, shocked, a little bit of sadness just because he died, but no one really cared. When Alvin died, no one really cared. When Sarah died, maybe Sarah, some people kind of sympathized with her just because of who she was. But besides Sarah and Luke, who else did, people really care about? Like in season 1 where when Ben died, people were sad or people were happy because he screwed up so much, people were glad that he was dead. Or when Larry died of a heart attack and you got to smash his head in, people were happy you got to smash his head in. Or you were sad that he had a heart attack and tried to save him. Or, when Carly got shot by Lily, you were angry at Lily, or you were sad, or you were shocked and depressed because these characters had come to have such a development to them and such depth to them that we actually cared about the outcome. And in season 2, that lacked in that. And that's the second thing I hope they do better in season 3, and that they give us a group of characters that we actually start to care about, because it really kind of takes away from the game when we're with these characters, but we really don't care about the characters that much. They're just kind of there, but we really don't care about them. And the third thing that this is kind of a subjective thing, but the third thing I want is the resolution of the characters from season 1 that we don't know what happened to. And those characters are Glenn, Lily, and Molly. We know what happened to Kenny. We all know, Kenny's kind of depends on who you are. But the third thing I want is that there will be some type of resolution to, what happened to Lily, She just kind of, either she left with the RV or you kind of left her for dead in the middle of the road. We don't know what happened to her. And I'd love to know what happened to Lily. Where'd she go? Did she die? Did she survive? Did she go to a group? Did she join something like Carver's Camp? What happened to her? Or Molly, Molly was the first badass character before we met Jane. This parkour badass that, could kick Lee's ass, was this, takes no crap from nobody. She left on her own, but what happened to her? Did she make it out of Savannah, or is she still stuck there? What happened to her? Or even Glenn, while Glenn, we know what happens to him in the TV series, we don't know if that's the same direction they kind of wanted to go with him in the series. While they did say that it's based on the same universe, I'd still be interested to know what happened to Glenn in Telltale's version of The Walking Dead. And so that's the third thing that I hope that they kind of make some closure on. And, those are the things that I hope that they do in season 3, because I have been a big fan of The Walking Dead since they released the first episode. I loved the first episode. I loved the ending of the first season. And I loved the ending of the second season. And that's why I have such high hopes. And, I hope they do good with this third episode or third season because of how they ended season 3 or season 2, sorry. Because they gave you a variety of endings that, could really take you anywhere. You could end up with Kenny. You could end up with Jane. You could end up by yourself. You could end up in Wellington with the baby. You could end up with Jane and the family at Carver's old camp. There are so many options they gave us that ended the game that they have opportunities to go everywhere with. And I just hope that they don't make season 3 like the other seasons where no matter what your ending was, all the endings they all come together and you meet the same characters, the same places. It just kind of comes all together and it really becomes pointless to have all those options because they all just tie together. So, I hope you guys enjoyed my hopes for Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 3. And if you did, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later and have an awesome day.